I read the so-called Best Fantasy Book of the Decade, also known as Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, and no, that is not an official award this book has won, but it's not unreasonable to call it the Best Fantasy Book of the Decade, because this book was written by one of the most prolific modern fantasy authors, and a lot of readers argue that this is his finest work to date, so yes, Words of Radiance is one of the most popular fantasy books released in the past decades, and I have finally read it, so what did I think? And before I jump into this review, I just want to apologize if my voice is a bit weird. I have a really bad cold. Okay, let's talk about Words of Radiance. So this review will be split into two parts. One 100% spoiler-free section at the start, and one spoiler-filled section, and I'll make it very clear when spoilers start. So if you haven't read anything by Sanderson, you are absolutely fine watching this first section. Secondly, this book is like 1100 pages, so I'll only focus on some aspects of this book, and I won't be able to literally go through every single scene. So if your favorite scene from this book isn't mentioned, then I'm sorry. So I've been putting off reading Words of Radiance for quite a while now for one specific reason. I am a huge Sanderson fan and have heard again and again that this is Sanderson's best work to date. So I really wanted to pick up this book in a time where I knew I could just enjoy this book and not feel stressed about reading it very quickly. If this was going to become potentially a new all-time favorite book, then I really wanted to just enjoy it. So after I finished Lost Metal, book 4 in Mistborn Era 2, I felt really up for continuing the Stormlight Archive. So let's answer the big question. Is this the best book I have ever read? The answer to that is probably not. But the real question is, does this book deserve all the hype? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, it does. Words of Radiance is a really, really phenomenal book, but it might not be for everyone. Let me explain. Now, if you loved or enjoyed Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight Archive, then it's very likely you will love Words of Radiance as well. This book basically takes everything that was good with The Way of Kings and improves upon it. The pacing is better, there are way more epic moments in this book, and the world expands, and the Santa Lounge is absolutely phenomenal. So basically think about this book as a better Way of Kings, which is really high praise since Way of Kings is a fantastic book. Also, this book's page count felt justified, which is probably the highest praise I can give it. This is an 1100 page book, so you would almost expect that this book would feel very long and like boring in parts, but actually no. Every chapter in this book felt justified, and as a whole, this book covers a lot of ground. It is almost like reading two books, since there is so much happening in this book, so that is definitely a reason to love this book. But why do I say that this book might not be for everyone? Well, for the simple reason that if you didn't enjoy Way of Kings, then you will probably not enjoy this book. Words of Radiance feels very much like the same story, just with more complexity, more character growth, and just more epic in scope, I suppose you could say. Now, I think most readers will agree that this is a better book than Way of Kings, so if you gave Way of Kings 4 stars, then it's likely you'll probably give this book 4.5 or even 5 stars. But if you hated The Way of Kings, then I don't think it's that likely that this book will change your mind about the series. But for the spoiler-free section, I'll say this. This is one of my favorite reads of the year and one of the best books I have ever read. I definitely think that Words of Radiance deserves all the hype, and potentially this is now my favorite Sanderson book to date. So if you haven't started Stormlight Archive yet, I can definitely recommend it, and I would give Words of Radiance 5 out of 5 stars. Alright. Let's get to spoilers. Spoilers will start now, so please click off now if you haven't read Words of Radiance. Okay? Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. You have been warned. The spoilers will start now. Okay, that's enough. Let's start talking about spoilers, and this section will be probably a bit more chaotic, and again, I probably won't be able to go over all the scenes, so I'll just talk about the ones that really stood out to me and that are on top of my mind right now. So, let's talk about characters first. As of now, Shallan is my favorite character, which I really didn't expect after finishing The Way of Kings. But I'm guessing every book in the Stormlight Archive focuses primarily on a new character, right? Way of Kings had a lot of Kaladin flashbacks, Words of Radiance focuses more on Shallan, and then I believe Oathbringer focuses more on Dalinar, right? I really wonder who Rhythm of War focuses on then. So I suppose it makes sense that having just finished this book, it makes sense that I feel a stronger connection to Shallan. The character that has the most growth in this book is definitely Shallan, but I've heard so many people hate Shallan, which I still really don't understand. Granted, I still need to read like 2,000 more pages in this series as of now to understand her arc better, but as of now, I really think that she's a phenomenal character, and I'm really curious to see what she will do in the later books that will make people hate her. But when it comes to some specific scenes that I loved, then I love the scene right after Yasna is killed, and Shallan has to meet up with this band, and she has to act like she's a highness, and simultaneously she has to act like she's a scammer or a fraudster. And then while she's doing this act, she literally meets Kaladin and asks him for his boots. And when she finally arrives at the Shattered Plane, Kaladin is literally the person she meets there. I mean, all of that was just so brilliantly done. I mean, Shallan's growth from being Yasna's apprentice to a Radiant has been really fascinating and enjoyable, and I really hope that I won't hate her in the later books, but we will see. Man, there's so much to say about this book. Okay, let's talk about Kaladin. I also still love Kaladin, obviously. Now let's just talk about that scene where the famous words, "Honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do," are uttered. Now, I knew that many readers loved that quote before going into this book, but I can finally see why now. I mean, oh my gosh, that duel is one of the best scenes I have ever read in fantasy, period. I mean, I literally got chills when Dalinar looks into Amaran's eyes, pleading, and Amaran turns his back on him, and Dalinar asks, "Is there no honor left?" And when Kaladin says, "Honor is dead, but I will see what I can do," and then just jumps into the duel, I mean, that was just so unbelievably epic. And when the duel is over, and Adolin gets a promise granted, and he challenges Sadeas to a duel, and then Kaladin just jumps into the scene and challenges Amran to a duel. I literally gasped when Kaladin said that. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is just so crazy, and I literally got chills all over my body. I mean, Kaladin is just such a great character. But I felt the first 500 pages initially were a tiny bit slow, but when you get to this duel, you understand everything so well. The payoff the reader gets in this duel scene is absolutely incredible. One of the most satisfying payoffs ever. Also, the whole ordeal with Moash was so good. I loved seeing how Kaladin really struggled with whether he should be loyal towards Dalinar or his own convictions regarding the king, and how that affected his bond with his spren, and that seeing how Kaladin comes out on this whole ordeal on top, and Moash ends up in the situation where he's betrayed both the king and Bridge 4. I mean, that's just mad scenes. And then Kaladin comes from that scene and jumps to save Dalinar from Set. I mean, again, that whole duel with Set is also incredible. Not as epic as the Adolin Kaladin duel, but still incredibly mad scene. And also not to mention the whole ordeal where Shallan and Kaladin are stuck underneath the Shattered Plane, and they run into a chasm fiend. A chasm fiend is one of the most terrifying creatures I ever come across in fantasy. Okay, I know I'm rambling, but there's just so much to talk about. It just feels like every chapter in this book, especially towards the end, just becomes more and more epic, and then you have this incredible Sanderlanche, which was just top notch and arguably the best Sanderlanche I've ever come across. And then at the end, Set was revived by a god. I mean, that was also super interesting and worrying, but also a bit confusing. I kind of feel like I don't really fully understand who the Heralds and Radiants are yet, and what their role is, and what their power is. I mean, I do understand some aspects, but I still feel like a lot of it is quite mysterious, but I'm sure that that will become clear as I read. But for example, this book ends by making it clear that Kaladin, Shallan, and Renarin are Radiants, right? But I'm not 100% sure what that means. If I'm correct, then the Radiants were an Asian order that are tasked with protecting Roshan from the Desolation, right? But if Kaladin, Shallan, and Renarin are Radiants, does this mean that they've gotten that as a role? Like they're now a Radiant? Or are they like ancient characters reborn again in this age? I mean, are they like, were they also Radiants back in the past and now they've been reborn? A bit like like the Wheel of Time. I'm guessing Words of Radiance probably explain a bit more exactly what it meant that Kaladin, Renarin, and Shallan are Radiants, but I probably missed it. Okay, also let's talk about Dalinar. I mean, so many people say that Dalinar is their favorite character, but that's mostly because of some of the events in Oathbringer. But for now, Dalinar is a really, really great character, but definitely not my favorite. I mean, I love him, but he doesn't come to the same level as Shallan and Kaladin yet. But I'm definitely open for him becoming a new favorite of mine in the next book. And also, we need to talk about the Spren. I mean, I find Spren absolutely hilarious for some reason. I just find it so funny that some of the Spren have really strong personalities and are quite clever and witty, and then you have Spren such as Wind Spren, who seemingly just exist. It just feels so random. Also, I really feel that this series needs to have dogs or pets, because how cool would it be if humans were able to understand their pets by looking at the Sprens like that are manifesting around them? I don't know why, but I would just love that so much. Oh, and also, Yasna is apparently not dead. Okay, I know I keep jumping around here, but I am a bit disappointed she isn't dead, but not surprising. It's almost laughable how common it is in fantasy that if you don't see a body, then the character isn't dead. I mean, in this book, that is literally the case for both Yasna and Set. Granted, Set actually did die, but I just find it so funny that, like, you can never trust that characters do die in fantasy. But I love Yasna, so I'm really interested in seeing what her role will be in book 3, and also the implication of her being alive will mean for the series going forward. But if there's one aspect of the series that I don't really feel adds that much to my reading experience, then it is the interludes. I mean, the interludes are definitely better in this book than in The Way of Kings, but I still feel whenever I'm reading them that I just want to get back to the main parts again. Now, I can definitely see them being much more interesting on a reread, but for now, I'm not enjoying the interludes that much. Okay, sorry for changing the topic again, but man, the Sanderlange in this book is insane. Actually, from page around 600 and onwards is just pure adrenaline-infused reading. It is just so good. And speaking of the ending, I'm really excited to see what the repercussions of entering Uri-Thuro, is that how you say it, will be, and also the murder of Sadius. I did not see Adolin killing Sadius coming, which was really satisfying, but I can see that having really bad consequences for our main gang in the later books. Yes, Sadius is finally dead, but at what cost? Man, I'm so excited to read Oathbringer. Okay, there are definitely a billion things I haven't touched on, but not to make this video too long, I will stop here. Now, I will take a break from Sanderson now, since I literally read Mistborn Era 2 back to back, and then I jumped straight into Words of Radiance. And while I have loved reading everything, I just need something else to break it up. But I will definitely be continuing the Stormlight Archives sometimes in 2023. I can finally understand why people love this book so much, and I am so excited to read Oathbringer next year. So let me know your thoughts on this book, and if you leave spoiler-filled comments, please make it clear with a heading stating spoilers ahead. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, special thanks for patrons who support what I do here. I really appreciate it.